development.
I know you've already shared so many amazing like tips for moms that have premature babies. So, but what would you say is one of the most important things for moms to know that because we get questions all the time, moms with premature babies in the group, and wanting to know about health and how to take care of them. And so, what would you say is something a really important tip for them to know?
Oh gosh, can I say two?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So the first I would say is remember how do I say this? Remember that when your baby is born, their whole life and their whole journey is not mapped out for them. We still have a lot to learn about who they are and how prematurity is going to affect them. One of the best pieces of advice I received from a NICU nurse I had was two babies can be born at the exact same gestational age and have
Mhm.
completely different outcomes. And I actually have a friend who has a son born at the exact same gestational age as my son. They could not be more different. What my son struggles with, he doesn't, and what he struggles with, my son doesn't. It's so varying. And so because of that, I realize that it can bring up a lot of overwhelm because that means you don't know. And
Mhm.
sometimes we just want to know. And I encourage you to think about your child's development really on a micro level. How are they doing? Especially when they're infants in the first like year or two, you're looking at kind of week by week oftentimes. And then you can
Mhm.
extend to, like quarter by quarter, or half year by half year, and then by year. How are they doing? And trust that they're going to show you when they need support and where they need it. And our job is to just notice those flags. And then we find the people who can help us, right? And I think that that's really important because we do try to, and I did this, absolutely did this myself. But just tell me what's going to happen, and then I'll do all the things to prepare myself for it now. And there's a lot of anxiety about, is this the appointment where we find out there's a delay? Is this the appointment where we find out there's something wrong with his heart or his kidneys or something? And we don't know is truly the answer. And if you can take your attention from what everybody's telling you and focus entirely on your child, they will tell you what
Mhm.
they need and where they need that support. So trust that it's going to unveil itself in the time that it unveils itself. And again, I fully recognize that it's much easier said than done. And also, I find that it takes a lot of the overwhelm out because now we're not trying to predict 3 years in the future, because that's this child who you have now is going to be a very different person 3 years from now, for example. And then I think the second thing is, which is I think is tied to this, is you are on a marathon. You are on a marathon. You're running a marathon. Don't try to sprint it. So, in taking such good care of your child, please don't forget about yourself. Do
Mhm.
what you need to do. And I'm not talking necessarily about bubble baths and, rose scented, whatever. Do that if you love that, totally. But I'm really talking about, don't neglect your basics, your day to day, take your showers. Make sure that you're meeting with friends, at least on Zoom, until we can meet again in person. Exercise. Don't feel guilty about going to work. Like you have to fulfill yourself, because this is a long road. And especially for those of parents who have children, no matter how preterm they are, who they know have long-term complications or health
Mhm.
issues that they're going to be dealing with, please remember not to sprint this marathon, because it
Mhm.
will catch up with you. And I know that that's not, we don't want that for ourselves or our children. So just a little gentle reminder there, which I also wished I'd had earlier
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing advice. I think so quickly we want to like figure everything out, and it's so easy to neglect ourselves. One of the things I keep hearing from moms too, in similar situations is one of the hardest parts is leaving the hospital without your baby if they're staying in the NICU. So what tips, advice, anything do you have to share with those moms, kind of going through that rough period of okay, I'm going home. I'm kind of feeling like I'm missing something and I'm not where I should be. So, yeah, what would you say to them?
I would say grieve that loss. Give yourself the time and the space and all the support you need, and really lean into it. because I think what happens in the NICU is you have to kind of keep it together really quickly because you want to be there for your baby and you're trying to figure out what they need and how you can support them, or your baby's starting to pump and it's a busy time.
Mhm.
And I find that there's often not a lot of space to acknowledge all the losses and all the things that are just really hard, and to really sit with them and acknowledge them, because it is in sitting with them and acknowledging them that they don't actually bury into the body and encode as trauma. So I think the best thing I can say is yes, that day is awful. And every night that you leave that NICU and you go home without your baby is awful. Give yourself the time and space to grieve that.
Mhm. So definitely important.